Coming up on Arirang News, the U.S. China trade war has hurt businesses around the world, but a study suggests the hardest hit has been South Korea, stuck in the middle of its two most powerful trade partners. The founder of Daewoo Group, Kim Woo-choong, has died at the age of 82. Kim presided over Daewoo's growth into one of the world's biggest companies and its downfall in the late 90s. And almost all of South Korea is under high levels of fine dust pollution today. The season's first emergency reduction measures taking place in regions including Seoul. It's 4 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea is having a relatively warm winter day today, but instead of freezing cold winds, people are taking refuge from the ultra-fine dust pollution that's choking the whole country. Kim Bo-kyung has the latest.
The sky is thick with hazy air and people are covering their mouths and noses with masks. Both fine dust and ultra-fine dust levels have risen today, especially in the capital and surrounding areas. According to the Korea Environment Corporation, as of 1 p.m. on Tuesday, fine dust levels went over 130 micrograms per cubic meter in Seoul, peaking at 145 micrograms per cubic meter in Incheon. Ultra-fine particles, which are smaller than 2.5 micrometers, were also reaching severe levels nationwide, with levels in the capital region being around 100 micrograms per cubic meter.
I saw that the fine dust level is high today through an application this morning, so I decided to wear a mask.
The Environment Ministry has issued fine dust advisories from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. today in Seoul, Jeong Kyeong-doo Province and Chungcheongbuk-do Province, and emergency fine dust reduction measures have also been put in place. Grade 5 emissions vehicles will be banned from operating in Seoul and the surrounding area until 9 p.m., and if operated, the drivers will be fined around $83. The measures also require public sector vehicles and public sector workers' vehicles that have plates ending with odd numbers not to be used. Foreigners will now be able to get translated text messages warning them of various advisories. The Korea Tourism Organization said on Monday that it will cooperate with the Ministry of Public Administration and Security to provide a service that sends emergency text messages to tourists in foreign languages. The service translates the disaster advisory text messages into 8 foreign languages, including English and Chinese, and sends them to tourists and foreigners residing in Korea. The service is available on an app called Emergency Ready or will be provided through the 1330 Korea Travel Hotline app. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
The U.S. has asked for a meeting of the UN Security Council this week to discuss North Korea's latest provocations. With both Pyongyang and Washington stepping up their rhetoric against each other, the UN has called on both sides to resume their nuclear talks. Kim Min-ji has more.
Despite the self-imposed year-end deadline set by North Korea for the U.S. to take a more flexible position in future denuclearization talks, tensions between the two sides show little sign of cooling off anytime soon. The UN Security Council is set to convene on Wednesday to discuss North Korea's provocations following a request from Washington. Citing diplomatic sources, Reuters said the U.S. wanted the Council to discuss Pyongyang's missile launches, as well as the possibility of an escalatory provocation. It's a change in stance on Washington's part, as until now, U.S. President Donald Trump hasn't made a big issue of the regime's short-range missile tests. The Security Council has met behind closed doors several times over the past couple of months, at the request of EU members over the regime's missile launches, which concluded only to issue a statement condemning North Korea's provocative actions. The latest development is seen as the U.S. turning the screw on North Korea after an exchange of verbal insults between the two sides and Pyongyang's very important test, which it claims to have conducted, widely seen as a solid-fuel ICBM engine. Meanwhile, the UN has stressed the need for Pyongyang and Washington to continue talks on denuclearization after North Korea's ambassador to the UN said denuclearization is off the table. UN spokesman Staffan Dujarric on Monday reiterated the Secretary-General's call on North Korea to work for peace and stability on the Korean peninsula and resume working-level talks with the U.S. He said diplomatic engagement is the only pathway to sustainable peace and complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
As we approach the end of the year and North Korea's unilateral deadline for the nuclear talks, the regime is talking tough to the U.S. It issued two statements on Monday warning President Trump to stop bluffing and come up with a new approach. Oh Jung-hee reports.
The U.S. was about to start a bright new week on Monday morning when North Korea threw another jab directed squarely at U.S. President Donald Trump. Pyongyang state-run Korean Central News Agency carried a statement by Ri Soo-yong, one of the vice chairmen of the North's ruling Workers' Party in charge of foreign affairs. Citing President Trump's recent remarks, Ri said, Trump seems to be, quote, anxious and fretful about what North Korea might do. He warned President Trump to carefully contemplate his next move unless he wants a disastrous outcome. He also stressed that Trump must stop his rude talk towards North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, reminding him about Kim's final decision at the year's end. The statement came a matter of hours after North Korea's Kim Yong-chol issued a statement of his own. Currently, the chairman of North Korea's Asia-Pacific Peace Committee and the regime's former top nuclear envoy, Kim Yong-chol said it's better for President Trump to think of a new calculation instead of threatening Pyongyang. Calling Trump, quote, a heedless and erratic old man, he said the regime has nothing more to lose. The two statements came in response to President Trump's tweet on Sunday that Kim could lose everything if he continues to act in a hostile manner towards the U.S. and warned him against trying to interfere with the 2020 presidential election. Observers believe Pyongyang is deliberately testing Washington's limits. But they also point out that the North's recent streak of tough statements and weapons testing announcements reflects North Korea's own anxiety over its rapidly approaching year-end deadline on nuclear talks. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea's Defense Minister Jeong Kyeong-doo has expressed deep regret about North Korea's series of ballistic missile launches this year, as well as its tests last weekend at the launching site in Dongchang-ri, which he acknowledged were tests of rocket engines. Jeong was speaking in Sydney, Australia on Monday at a joint press conference of the 4th Defense and Foreign Affairs Ministers meeting. This is the first official confirmation by Seoul's Defense Ministry of North Korea's testing at Dongchang-ri as an engine combustion test. He also strongly urged the North to refrain from actions that raise military tensions and to respond in kind to the efforts of the South Korea-U.S. alliance and the international community to resolve issues through dialogue. South Korean President Moon Jae-in says he feels an immense responsibility as president to ensure the safety of the people. He was speaking at a funeral in Daewoo this morning for 5 firefighters who died on the job in a helicopter crash near Korea's easternmost island of Dokdo in October. Take a listen.
5분의 헌신과 희생에 깊은 존경의 마음을 바치며 다급하고 간절한 국민의 부름에 가장 앞장섰던 고인들처럼 국민의 안전에 대해 대통령으로서 무한한 책임감을 가지겠습니다. 또한 소방관들의 안전과 행복을 지키는 것 역시 국가의 몫임을 잊지 않겠습니다.
President Moon called out the names of each of the heroes to mourn their deaths and highlight their sacrifice for the country. He promised the government's utmost efforts to investigate the cause of the accident and to remember the firefighters' sacrifices. It's the first time the central government has organized such a funeral and for a sitting president to deliver a eulogy since the National Emergency Management Agency was established in 2004. In South Korea's National Assembly, rival party lawmakers had reached an agreement Monday that a unified budget proposal for next year would be put up for a full floor vote. At this point, however, they're still negotiating changes to it. For more, we connect to our Kim Mo-gyun at the National Assembly. Mo-gyun?
Hi, Devin. Rival parties were finally able to open the plenary session today. Lawmakers passed more than a dozen bills this morning, which include the so-called Minshik Bill, a revised Road Traffic Act, which seeks to ensure children's safety in school zones, as well as the revised Parking Lots Act, or the Hajun Bill, which seeks to install anti-skid facilities to strengthen safety in parking lots. Lawmakers are also set to pass more than 100 non-contentious bills related to the economy and people's livelihoods, which had been on hold after the main opposition Liberty Korea Party requested a filibuster on November 29th. The initial plan was to put these bills up for a vote after a 2-hour lunch break at 2 p.m., but until now, the session hasn't resumed yet.
So, Morgan, what's causing the delay on those bills? And for the budget, we expect it to be approved by the end of the day?
Well, we still don't know when the plenary session will resume because National Assembly Speaker Moon and the floor leaders of the ruling Democratic Party, main opposition Liberty Korea Party, and the centrist Media Party have been holding lengthy discussions in the past hours to strike a deal on revising the budget. In September, the government submitted a proposal for next year worth roughly $420 billion, and rival party lawmakers have been working to come up with a revised version and pass it in today's plenary session. But for the moment, lawmakers still haven't been able to narrow their differences. The Liberty Korea Party wants more cuts, while the ruling Democratic Party has been standing its ground, saying that it won't be possible. They're expected to negotiate more, but if the parties can't reach a compromise by the end of the day, the Democratic Party says it's even considering a vote on a separate budget proposal created by the so-called 4+1 consultative body, a group of the 5 biggest parties, but not the main opposition. The Liberty Korea Party says it still has room to push through a filibuster this evening, so we can expect a long day. That's all I have for now. Back to you, Devin.
Kim Mo-kyun, thank you. The U.S.-China trade wars hurt businesses around the world, but research shows that South Korea has actually been hurt the most. Kim Da-mi explains.
In the trade war between the world's 2 largest economies, Korea has suffered the most collateral damage. That's according to Uri Finance Research Institute on Tuesday, who pointed to Korea's heavy dependence on exports to China as part of the global supply chain, especially in semiconductors and manufacturing. In fact, almost 27% of Korean exports depend on China, much higher than Japan, Germany, and France. It was therefore inevitable that the trade war would affect Korea, with Seoul's exports to Beijing this year plunging by almost 10%, the biggest drop among the world's top 10 trading nations. The research did include a hint of hope that Seoul would have a bright economic outlook if Washington and Beijing complete the much-anticipated Phase 1 deal, as a global investment and the world trade volume would recover. However, based on the research, Korea's economy will otherwise suffer in the long term due to global uncertainties if the next steps of the trade deal lag behind. While Washington has made it crystal clear that the U.S. won't do a deal that's unfavorable, China's Commerce Ministry on Monday raised hopes of striking a deal that satisfies both countries. Foreign investors are also hopeful of the upcoming negotiations. According to another survey by the Institute last week on foreign finance institutions in Hong Kong and Singapore, just over half of the 18 institutions were optimistic about the Phase 1 deal. But almost 70% of them believe the Phase 2 deal will be stretched out until even after the upcoming U.S. election next November. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
The former chairman of Daewoo Group, Kim Woo-choong, has died at the age of 82 after a battle with a chronic illness. Kim founded what became one of the world's biggest companies, though it ended up bankrupt 2 decades ago. Kim Yo-sun reports.
Former Daewoo Group chairman Kim Woo-choong passed away late Monday at a hospital in Suwon, just south of Seoul. He was 82 years old. Kim's health started to deteriorate in August last year and progressively got worse.
He suffered severe pneumonia lately and received injections of antibiotics.
Kim founded a small textile trading company in 1967, which later grew into one of the biggest industrial conglomerates in the world. Daewoo Group, which translates into Great Universe in Korea, outpaced other South Korean conglomerates including Hyundai and Samsung in its global reach, expanding its global network to over 100 countries. In just 15 years, the group became South Korea's 4th largest conglomerate in terms of asset size. However, the company ran into deep financial problems during the Asian financial crisis in 1997. It went bankrupt in 1999 with debts of over $80 billion. Kim blamed his company's downfall on the strategies of then-President Kim Dae-jung's economic team, which forced Daewoo Group to lower its debt ratio below 200% a year. In 2002, the group's flagship company, Daewoo Motor, was sold to General Motors and renamed GM Korea. Its other affiliates like Daewoo Engineering and Construction, as well as Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering, were sold to other domestic rivals. Following the group's bankruptcy, Kim fled South Korea and spent years living abroad, but he was later sentenced to 8.5 years in prison over embezzlement and accounting fraud in 2006.
억울함도 있고 비속함도 분노도 없지 않았지만은 되돌릴 수 없는 과거이기 때문에.
After being pardoned by presidential amnesty in 2008, he focused on nurturing young entrepreneurs in other parts of the world, including Vietnam, which he regarded as his second home. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, global strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, we're just a few days away from that deadline set by the U.S. for a trade deal with China, where it's going to impose more tariffs December 15th. How are the markets responding to that?
Yes, the market seems to be quite volatile, actually taking some breather, because until the beginning of this week, the market's been quite strong due to a lot of the economic numbers coming out from the U.S. as well as China. And I don't think that the U.S. will probably raise taxes, even though that the trade deal might not be signed before that date of December 15th. Because the additional tax increase means that the U.S. will face quite significantly higher inflationary environment. And right now, it is the core inflations at around 2% territories. High inflation means higher interest rate, and that means a recession coming through quite soon. So therefore, we don't think that the U.S. will be in a position to raise the additional taxes at this point in time. And also, though, U.S. can continue to put pressure on China with the current tax rates that already applied. On 15th of December, no tax will be raised, but until the actual that date, market should be probably taking some breather and might be somewhat volatile around the current territories. And once the no tax was probably announced, if it is announced on the 15th of December, the market was to take the additional strong gains in the future.
Right. Well, shares of Saudi Arabia's national oil company Aramco will start trading this Wednesday. What effect do you think that might have on the Korean financial markets?
Well, I think it already did quite a bit of negative implications. As you know, that the foreign investors were a big major net seller in the last several weeks. Just a 1 month period, they sold over $4 billion of Korean equities. And that's because of the two reasons. One is that the Aramco listing is expected to happen, and they need to raise money. And also the MSCI index changes where the percentage of Korea goes down while the China goes up. So those two factors have affected negatively for the Korean equity market. And that has created a huge decline of the Korean equity market by more than 4% in the last several weeks. However, though, once the listing happens this week, we don't think that there will be any additional money going into this listing. Even though the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is talking about the fair value should be $2 trillion rather than the current $1.71 trillion that is expected to get listed. If the additional money pours into this, then yes, that could have an additional negative implication for Kospi. But I think that already the money has been raised, and I don't think that any additional net selling will come through because of this listing on Wednesday.
Well, now we have news that the People's Bank of China will soon start testing a digital currency, which will be a first for a major economy. How is this similar to or different from cryptocurrency, and what effect might a digital Chinese currency have globally?
Yes, Jack Lee, the managing partner of HCM Capital, said that China is developing a framework called the Digital Currency Electronic Payment, or DCEP. This would allow its central bank to issue a digital currency to commercial banks and third-party payment networks such as Alipay and WeChat Pay. Several experts have warned that the virtual currency could increase the risk of fraud, particularly money laundering and terrorism financing. But many governments have not found a way to regulate the space. It seems that obviously China is the first one to come out with this. And the launch of China's digital currency could push many authorities globally around the world to decide on how they want to use and regulate such technology of this. The new details have been revealed by the China of upcoming digital currency, which appear to confirm the speculation that it will be fully centralized. The key factor about this is centralization. A centralized digital currency in China is a worrying proposition, given that its social credit rating system, estimated to be fully live in 2020, cracks down on its citizens for violations as small as playing music so loudly on train or combining this with the full control over the wealth makes citizens powerless. This is an argumentation that's been made. But in any way, China is well in position to try to do this because it is trying to move away from the dollar-denominated global trade to more of a renminbi-denominated trade percentage to be increased in the future. In any case, this digital currency will be one method to reduce the power of the U.S. and dollar while raising the power of the renminbi as well as the Chinese government's influence into the global economy.
Fascinating. That's where we'll have to wrap it up for today, though, Mr. Yu. Thank you for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Now, 2 South Korean companies have been put on a list of companies approved for subsidies from the Chinese government for the production of electric car batteries. Beijing's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology announced Monday that the recommended firms include LG Chem, South Korea's leading chemical company, and SK Innovation. This marks the first time since 2016 that Chinese state subsidies have been given to electric cars equipped with South Korean batteries. The Chinese government has reportedly ordered public institutions to get rid of all foreign PC hardware and operating systems. China would be trying to move away from its reliance on American technology in particular, but it's a goal many see as unrealistic. Our Kim Jae-hee has the details.
According to the Financial Times, the Chinese Communist Party's central office ordered this year that all state offices and public institutions in China phase out all foreign hardware and software they're using. Under the so-called 352 policy, China plans to replace around 30% of the computers and software by the end of 2020, an additional 50% by 2021, and remove all the remaining systems by 2022. Experts say the move, which comes amid the ongoing U.S.-China trade war, seems aimed at detaching China from the influence of U.S. technology and establish independence from American companies.
China developed its own operating system in October. In a countermeasure to U.S. sanctions, China will substitute Windows, which it imports from the U.S., with its newly developed software. So technically, this is a countermeasure to the trade war.
The move means an estimated 20 to 30 million pieces of foreign equipment will be replaced over the next 3 years. However, some analysts are pessimistic, saying Chinese replacements for such established and reliable products like Windows and Microsoft will fall far short of the required standard and computing power China needs. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
In other news, the Seoul metropolitan government has designated 8 traditional wood and clay houses, known in Korean as hanok, as the capital's excellent hanoks of 2019. The newly certified houses are located near Gyeongbuk-do Palace and in Eunpyeong Hanok Village. Seoul first started designating excellent hanoks in 2016 to promote the value of Korea's traditional home design. With this year's new designations, 63 hanoks have now been named Seoul Excellent Hanoks. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.
(2016년 9월 28일) 부정청탁 및